Welcome to Cryptic Accounts, a podcast by paranoid people for paranoid people. I'm your host this week, Dennis Cheney, and this week on the show we have the true history of weather control. I'm joined as always with Patrick Ryan. How are you doing, Patrick?
I'm good. Gonna learn about weather.
Yeah, we're going to learn about weather. I
Government
wanted to
weather.
do a spooky show because we're 10 days out from Halloween.
And weather is what you came up with.
I bought a set of 3 books of the most terrifying alien abduction experiences.
Yeah.
I had picked out the best ones.
Uh-huh.
I actually got stuff done really early, and then I found out that I was reading fiction.
Oh.
Because I'm a genius.
I mean, I can't say that I haven't been there. Man, I'm trying to think of what the thing was that I finally messaged you. It was like, hey, there's like a fandom wiki for this. And you're like, yeah, that's made up. And I'm like, oh no.
Yeah, we can all fall for it. Man, can't believe it, man. You can't trust anything this day and age. But you know what's definitely real? Weather control.
Yeah. It's just upsetting when we get like really far into research and we've got like everything put together and then it's like, oh.
Or yeah, sometimes it's not even.
How come there's so many people were saying this was true?
Right, or sometimes it's not even necessarily fake. It's just you find out how tenuous it is, and it's like, uh-oh.
Yeah, there's a lot of that too, and it's just like, wow, there's not as much to this as I thought there was going to be.
So I'm going to tell you about something that I thought was fake until now. I'm 50-50 on it, maybe closer towards beliefs.
Okay.
And that is the chemtrail conspiracy theory.
Okay.
Have you ever heard of chemtrails?
Oh yeah, I know. I know about chemtrails. I mean, I don't think I know as much as you're probably getting ready to let me know about, but I think they're real. I think something's going on there.
Yeah, I always thought for those who don't know, Wikipedia describes the chemtrail conspiracy theory as an erroneous belief that long-lasting condensation trails consisting of chemical or biological agents left in the sky by high-flying aircraft sprayed for nefarious purposes undisclosed to the general public. Believers in this conspiracy theory say that while normal contrails dissipate relatively quickly, contrails that linger must contain additional substances. Those who subscribe to the theory speculate that the purpose of the chemical release may be solar radiation management, weather modification, psychological manipulation, human population control, biological or chemical warfare, or testing of different biological and chemical agents. And this claim has been dismissed by the scientific community, including the famous California drought manipulation conspiracy theory, which was promoted by a number of independent researchers, positing that the 2011 to 2017 drought in California was deliberate man-made phenomenon created by weather modification, which was also dismissed by the scientific community as fringe science or pseudoscience.
All right. Okay. So I'm on board, I think, so when you say you're only so I'm guessing 75, 80% belief at this point.
Well, okay. So like most things we research, at one point it's like, oh, it's got to be fake because as Wikipedia says, the mainstream media calls it fringe science. But then I realized,
went off of everything that Wikipedia said about anything that we're talking about, most of the time I'd be like, well, there's nothing here. Obviously, Wikipedia said there is no,
right.
This is a conspiracy theory and fringe whatever.
Anytime I use Wikipedia, it's to be like the baseline of what you're going to read or you're going to hear on TV. And so,
or if I'm referencing something else in a different story and it's just like, this is what this is, just real
this quick. Is the year it happened or something like that. I just wanted to pull that up because if you Google chemtrails, that's what you're going to get. And so I'm going to read to you a pretty scholarly paper, which we're going to put a link up to. And then let's decide what we think of chemtrails after that, because I think there's an obvious mind game going on here with the way the media reports about it.
That doesn't sound like the media.
So, no, not at all. If there's one person you could trust, it's the media.
Yep.
Declassified records show that from 1949 to 1955, the British Royal Air Force, the RAF, released various substances, including dry ice, silver iodide, and salt into the atmosphere at high altitudes in order to induce rain. The clouds would then precipitate, pulled down below freezing point by the extra weight of the dense particles, thus making it rain sooner and heavier than it might have done, The Guardian reported. Using chemicals supplied by ICI, international scientists, were involved in the experiments, including specialists from the Cranfield College of Aeronautics and the Royal Air Force's meteorological research base in Farnborough. Perhaps the most significant aspect of the program was that the weather weaponization experiments continued 3 years after they produced the worst recorded flood in British history.
Okay, so the fact that this is already happening in the late 40s, early 50s,
and it's
with
declassified.
With successful results.
Yeah, with disastrous results. They accidentally flooded a town, actually. And it's
all right, Wikipedia, there's nothing to any of this. All right.
Yeah. Okay, mainstream media. The Linemouth disaster of 1952. The Telegraph reported how former RAF servicemen described how they took part in what the experiments in the years running up to the flood. Of Project Cumulus, or Operation Witch Doctor, as it was nicknamed by squadron leader Lynn Otley, the BBC reported how the glider pilot Aaron Yates sprayed chemicals over Bedfordshire, after which, quote, scientists told him it caused a heavy downpour in Staines, 50 miles away in Middlesex.
What was the pilot? Oh, hold on. What was the pilot's name?
Lynn Otley. He's a British pilot.
Oh, okay.
So I never heard of him before. I don't know if he's involved in any other, but the BBC basically blew this open like a few years ago.
Well, no, that was a squadron leader. Did they talk to
pilot? The pilot was Alan Yates.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And are they talking to him? Like, has he talked about it?
Yeah, they're talking to the BBC.
Okay. All right. So again, this seems right off the bat pretty solid proof that there's a desire to play with weather and releasing stuff into the atmosphere.
Well, yeah, and you're gonna find out that this just goes back and forth depending on what story you're reading. It's a conspiracy one moment and then it's completely real. So
okay. Well, that's the way it is with a lot of these things, really. Like, stuff gets declassified and released, but then at the same time they're going, well, but not that.
So in this, however, and the BBC, the author believes that them saying it caused a downpour 50 miles away in Middlesex, he believes that is actually a disinformation campaign by the BBC, which is like public media there. Because what actually happened was, pretty much right where they did this stuff at Linemouth, there was a gigantic flood. And so concerning the seeding operations that caused the Linemouth disaster, RAF Captain John Hart explained how in 1952, we flew straight through the top of the cloud, poured dry ice down into the cloud. We flew down to see if any rain came out of the cloud, and it did. About 30 minutes later, and we all cheered. Alan Yates said the BBC had been filming the experiments, but the resulting program was abandoned when the country woke up to news of the Linemouth flood the day before it was due to be broadcast. Within just a few minutes of the cloud seeding operation, some 90 million tons of water fell into Linemouth.
That feels like a lot.
That's a lot of rain.
I don't even know how to imagine what 90 million tons of water is. We're using weight. We're not even using like.
Yeah, worst flood in British history, and it happened 30 minutes after this experiment. And
I feel like it's pretty safe to correlate those two things.
Yeah, I feel like it would be too.
I'm not a scientist, but
I'm no weather expert.
In my gut, I feel like.
Also, like, the whole idea of like this dry ice, and it doesn't matter what they're dropping, whether it's chemicals or whatever. The whole idea is that it stays up in the atmosphere, just like people say chemtrails do.
Yeah.
So
Well, obviously, because it's making it rain, so it's done something where it's
yeah, it's not
staying in
falling
the
down.
atmosphere up there.
Exactly.
The ground didn't get hit with a bunch of dry ice or whatever.
I got hit with a bunch of water.
Yeah.
So 90 million tons of water fell into Linemouth, destroying hundreds of homes and businesses, causing the death of 35 people.
What? Is it just flooding so bad that it's like
it just flooded.
People are getting carried away in cars and stuff? I mean, I know when real bad floods. I'm just trying to. I'm trying to imagine what 90 million tons of water looks like. That's just that's crazy.
I am too. I didn't think to Google that, although it's a lot of water.
I mean, yeah. So 35 people are dying. So
in 2000, 35 people are dying, which is actually a lot of people for a flood. I mean,
yeah, you don't hear. I mean,
especially in like Britain or someplace that's like first world. So in 2001, the BBC kind of came clean, and a BBC investigation confirmed that secret experiments were causing heavy rainfall, though the Ministry of Defense denied any connection between the experiments and the flood. Initially, the Ministry of Defense even denied conducting any cloud seeding experiments at all, saying, quote, survivors tell how the air smelled of, oh, no, this is survivor speaking, but survivors tell how the air smelled of sulfur on the afternoon of the floods, and the rain fell so hard that it hurt people's faces.
Yeah, okay, so I'm looking at pictures, and it basically looks like a river just suddenly appeared through the middle of this town.
Yeah, it's not
like
normal.
Buildings are crumbled and like falling apart. Like foundations were like ruined.
Yeah, I looked up stuff too. It's pretty gnarly. It's not like it's like too big. If it is a coincidence that they were trying to make rain and then this happened, then it's like one of the biggest coincidences like ever.
I would take it as a sign that you're not supposed to be messing with what you're messing with, regardless. No. Like, this doesn't normally happen. You did this, and then this weird thing happened. Like, I feel like it takes a scientist to put these things together.
It's the military, though, man. Like, they'll do anything.
Yeah, that's true. Good guys. Good guys.
Good guys. Let's see here. The BBC reported that trees were uprooted and formed dams behind bridges, creating walls of water that carried huge boulders into the village, destroying shops, hotels, and homes.
Okay, maybe that's what got the buildings I'm looking at then.
The huge boulders. Water washed out to the sea. Bodies washed out to the sea that were never found. The report quoted Tony Speller, a former North Devon member of parliament, saying that when he asked for Ministry of Defense files, quote, I could never find anything of consequence except for the fact that papers were clearly missing for the significant years of 1949 to 1955. So, yeah, they reported 35 deaths. And a decade later, the BBC documentary Country Tracks, which was broadcast in actually 2000. They reported 35 deaths a decade later. Then in 2011, the BBC documentary County Tracks confirmed that one corpse, perhaps a member of the Secret Services dispatched to monitor the operations, could not be accounted for. Documents expressed concern by the Ministry of Defense over who would be financially liable if such rainmaking experiments went wrong, the Telegraph has reported. Ending with a citation from a Ministry of Defense statement made in 2001 in light of the revolutions. Quote, cloud seeding has rarely been successful anywhere in the world. Consequently, the Met Office has not pursued this line of research for many years. Which seems like a convenient thing to leak.
Yeah.
And we'll see how believable that is. The Ministry of Defense. All right. The Ministry of Defense not only contradicted itself because its earlier statements denied involvement in any cloud seeding operations, but it contradicted itself again in 2010 by announcing in a public document that out to 2040, weather modification will continue to be explored. The aims are to obtain more water, reduce hail damage, eliminate fog, and other similar practical
Wait,
results.
wait, didn't they just say they quit doing it though? Like,
In like 2001, they said we quit doing it many years ago because it didn't work. And then
okay,
9 years later, they said, we're going to keep doing it.
they never stopped doing it.
No, they never stopped doing it.
Okay.
And this is just, we haven't even got to the US yet. This is just Britain.
Well, now I'm just all in my head, and I like I've looked into HAARP before. Like I'm just, and I've thought about this before. Like how many floods and extreme weather conditions that have happened over the last 20 years? Like, is this thing getting ramped up in some weird way?
Oh, and they could never let us know. There
No.
could be a war happening. We could be at war like with other countries, like China has a big flood, we have a big flood. You know what I mean? Like nobody would ever know.
I hadn't even thought about that aspect. I hadn't gone that far with it. I was just thinking about accidents. Yeah, at this point, I mean, you probably know how to do it if you've been doing it for like 60, 70 years.
Yeah, they've been doing it at least since the late 40s.
Yeah. So 50 to 60.
They
Yeah.
they also think that the weather manipulation could change military operating conditions, limiting aviation flight, generating poor visibility, disrupting lines of communication, and reducing morale, saying, quote, returning home to see your home floating down a river is indeed bound to affect morale.
Whew.
The Ministry of Defense continues. Analysis by the World Meteorological Organization has shown that if successful, rainfall enhancement and hail suppression operations would have significant economic benefit. And the
Yes.
WMO notes that there are several operational programs in fog dispersion, rain and snow enhancement, as well as hail suppression.
Okay. That's
Now,
sounds nice. But
the
it means you can
U.S.
probably take things the opposite way pretty easily too.
Oh, I'm sure the military is just super interested in like helping grow crops.
Yeah, that's always the military's main concern is helping the citizens of whatever country. That's like a pretty unanimous thing with militaries around the world.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
That's generally why they do things.
Yeah.
Now, the Pentagon has publicly announced their commitment to, quote, achieve full spectrum dominance by 2020. And the fact that the Ministry of Defense and the Air Force had the capacity to destroy an entire village with 90 million tons of rainfall as far back as 1950s means we must take seriously the possibility that weather weaponization is being used under the cover of anthropogenic global warming, which is no doubt happening, but provides a perfect cover for freak weather events.
Yep. That's okay.
We've had like more hurricanes this year or something like that.
Yep.
This might be their big year where they're showing off. They're probably having parties over in the Ministry of Defense and the Air Force.
Who knows? That's just, yeah. I mean, maybe we're getting hurricanes slung at us.
Just to see what's up.
Yeah.
Nobody would suspects it when it's hitting you.
Well, yeah. And how are you going to prove that somebody's doing it to you?
Yeah, exactly. You just sound crazy, pretty much.
Yeah, it pretty much makes it so you can deny any of that. Like it would be really hard for somebody to prove that you caused that to happen miles and miles away, send a hurricane towards their country.
It's the perfect weapon.
Kind of. I mean, I don't know that it's necessarily it's a shotgun spray approach. Like, I mean, you're not necessarily going to get who you want to get, but you're going to get a lot.
Right. And the Air Force has actually been weirdly open about this. They have a document. They actually had two. They had one from the 60s and one from the late 90s.
Oh, good. So they were doing it in the 60s.
Oh, we'll get to that.
Okie dokie.
So the U.S. Air Force 2025 think tank stated in a long-term study that weather weaponization, quote, provides opportunities to impact operations across the full spectrum of conflict and is pertinent to all possible futures. The
Opportunities.
opportunities, man. I want to work for a government think tank. I'll be like, giant monster snakes increase opportunity.
They will scare our enemies.
Their report counts on the fact that, quote, some segments of society will always be reluctant to examine controversial issues such as weather modification. So they're counting on us. They've just outraged,
like thinking it's just a completely fake thing. The majority of people.
It sounds crazy. It's like
it
MK Ultra.
Yeah.
Now, remember how Wikipedia said this is a conspiracy theory that's been debunked by the mainstream media?
I do remember you mentioning that.
That's until you Google the right terms.
What are those right terms, Dennis?
Well, for instance, prior to the, quote, Environmental Modification Convention signed in Geneva in 1977.
Man, why is there always crazy, weird stuff going on in Geneva?
I know, that's like where the world gets together to be like,
that's where CERN is. That's where the Large Hadron Collider is. Like,
there has to be something like ley lines or something, like some dark forces or something. Like they gotta do all this stuff there.
That would make sense. We're gonna have to look into that at some point.
Now, according to mainstream sources, and reported on the same encyclopedia that said this is all bunk, the United States Air Force, prior to that treaty signed in 1977, used weather warfare in the Vietnam War.
Wait, what?
Yeah, this is apparently just a fact. This isn't even conspiracy. Okay. Under the auspices of the Air Weather Service, the United States, quote, it was called Operation Popeye.
Of course it was.
I wonder what, I don't know, spinach? I'm not sure.
I was trying to look for a connection there. I'm like, clouds. They just picked a weird name because it was the 60s.
Yeah, Popeye was popular. It was a different time,
I guess.
So we
Sailor Man.
Oh, that's right. The sea.
Yeah.
So we've gone from like accidentally flooding a British village in the 50s to the 60s, where Operation Popeye used cloud seeding over the Ho Chi Minh Trail, increasing rainfall by an estimated 30% in 1967 and 1968, in hopes that the rainfall would reduce the rate of infiltration down the trail.
And I think it already rains a lot there anyway.
Yeah, it does. I just keep thinking when I was reading this about like Forrest Gump when he talks about how much it rains. I'm like, oh, Forrest.
It turns out Forrest had a point.
Forrest was onto something. A research paper produced by the Air Force, written in 1996, speculates about the future use of nanotechnology to produce artificial weather, clouds of microscopic computer particles, all communicating with each other to form an intelligent fog that could be used for various purposes.
We're going to have AI fog? That's terrifying.
Yeah, we're going to have sentient fog.
So you would actually, I would think, be able to like then manipulate fog to like move around or possibly carry chemical agents.
You would just see this fog like moving into your like,
oh man, like some weird horror film stuff where the fog is chasing you.
Yes. That's literally what it would be used for.
Or no, like Hunger Games. In the Hunger Games when the fog's coming at him, but then it like stops. It has like, oh, sorry.
Is it like intelligent fog?
Kind of like they release it and it like rolls down a hill, but then it stops at a certain point. And then we'll just like create a wall. Like it basically just pushes everybody towards the center.
Oh, okay.
Like, but Fortnite. Yeah, it's like controlled.
Yeah, that's what we're gonna have for real.
You mean we already have? This is 1996 when they've had 24 years to figure this out.
Yeah,
they definitely have this by now.
They describe it as a quote force multiplier with tremendous power that could be exploited. I need to look into
a force multiplier. What does that even mean? Are they like video game terms? What are we talking about right now?
Yeah, so I actually did look that. So it's kind of like
stuff.
you know, if I got 10 guys and you got 10 guys, but I have like magic
Super fog?
fog, yeah, then it's more like I have 100 guys basically, or you could have 100 guys, but I got magic fog. It's a
I'll
force
just make you
multiplier.
hallucinate, and it seems like I have 100 guys.
Yeah, it makes you wonder. Um, I'm gonna have to do a show or research like strange fog to see if they're already using this stuff,
I'm gonna
or if
go out on
there's.
a limb here and stake my flag in the fact that this is already happening. Like I don't even need to read 1990s, 24 years. Yeah, they figured this out.
Yeah, I would like to see if any soldiers in like Iraq or something remember like unusually foggy days, like in the desert or something like that. Like,
Yeah.
I didn't get that far into it because I was kind of just like verifying that this is all true, and it is, which is terrifying. But I might have to do like a mystery fog episode or something like that in the future.
I don't know, Dennis. This is actually turning out to be pretty spooky.
Oh yeah,
I know you were worried about that going into this episode, but I feel pretty creeped out right now. So
I was
good
worried about
job.
the spook factor. Yeah, sentient fog. I forgot I put that in there to be honest, but yeah.
Yeah. Thanks. Now I'm gonna be worried about fog.
So, do
I
you
was
remember
already
our?
scared of the clouds way up there. Now I'm worried about the fog that's on the
No,
ground near me.
I know. Every time it's a foggy day, I'm gonna be worried it's gonna be like making me go
Ground
insane.
clouds, as I like to call them.
Ground clouds. TM. So the General George Kitty, commander of the U.S. Strategic Air Command in the 40s, once stated, "The nation which first learns to plot the paths of air masses accurately and learns to control the time and place of precipitation will dominate the globe."
Man, that is a scary statement.
Dude, I feel like the 40s and the 50s were like the best time to be in the military. Like,
I mean, for real, there was like nothing that was off limits. There was an idea that anybody called crazy. They were just like, maybe.
yeah, the
Why
60s
don't we
too.
try it?
Psychics, nuclear stuff, control the weather, put robots and cats. I
Oh
mean,
yeah, I forgot about Acoustic Kitty.
so soon after this quote came Project Sirius, the first explicit military rainmaking effort in the West. 50 years later, the United States Air Force, in collaboration with the World Meteorological Office, which I'm starting to think is just like one of those weird covert, like,
It's starting to sound like a supervillain company. I'm going to be honest with you.
yeah, they had come a long way 50 years later. Under the director of weather, the U.S. Air, the director of weather, that is like something straight out of science fiction.
That is a scary title, first of all.
The U.S.
Also,
Air,
super cool.
the U.S. Air Force has a director of
Can
weather.
you imagine that being on your Tinder profile?
Oh yeah,
I
you
am the
just be.
director of weather at World Meteorological Office,
I control the weather.
and yet I can't find love.
And so here's how it's breaking down operationally. So they have a director of weather, which is the U.S. Air Force, which operates a deputy chief of staff for air and space operations, who oversees 9 operational weather squadrons, each of which has an assigned geographical area of responsibility. The Air Force Weather Organization, the Air Force Weather Agency, the 55th Space Weather Squadron, the Air Force Combat Climatology Center, and the Air Force Combat Weather Center.
And I feel
Continental.
like several of these could have been under one banner head. Like, this is
Yeah,
actually scarier that they have different divisions like this.
that's how they do it, man.
Like, depending on how bad, like, one thing is just like, the flood of town, and the other one's like killer fog. Like, but they each got their specialty.
Now I looked into it, and um, most of these are responsible for like monitoring weather, so they can use it to their advantage. Is the story?
Monitoring weather that they manipulated, possibly.
Well, yeah.
That's kind of what I'm picking up here.
So, well, you got to monitor the weather to know how to manipulate it too.
That is true.
Yeah.
And then once you manipulate it, you got to monitor it to see how good you did. Or bad, depending on, how you're looking at this.
You want to guess what this team calls themselves?
I don't know.
They're the Weather Warriors.
Oh.
That's their real name.
Really?
Yeah.
Like the whole group, like all the different squadrons, that's them together. Like that's their banner head is the Weather Warrior.
That's like their nickname. Yeah, it's the Weather Warriors. They basically like, and it really is.
I mean, now it sounds like they should be wearing capes or something. To be honest with you.
And some of them, to be fair, I did research this. They're not all controlling the weather. Like it really is like a mobile weather unit that like travels along with the military to like see what's up, just so you don't get taken off guard, more or less. Although I wonder, like with satellites and stuff, why you would even need that anymore. But, okay.
I feel like, much like a typewriter repairman, that may be a job that's kind of gone obsolete with technology.
Also, it's like really tied into Space Command, which we might get into later, because some people think that like this got rolled into like the Space Force and like SDI and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So the U.S. Navy has a comparable amount of weather units to the Air Force. And given the dependence on weather information of the Department of Defense and increasingly Space Command, the Woodrow Wilson Center's James R. Fleming, who's like a pretty renowned dude. I looked him up. He has a lot of like weather rewards. He's like a university professor and has all these honorifics. He observed that it's virtually impossible to imagine that the world's powers would resist the temptation to explore the military use of any potentially climate-altering technology.
That feels like a duh statement.
Yes, and a lot of this is just beating this. So the U.S. Air Force 2025 think tank on the Air War College explained in 1996 that, quote, a global network of sensors provides weather warriors with the means to monitor and accurately predict weather activities with their effects on military operations. A diverse set of weather modification tools, which they hope to have ready by 2025, if they haven't already, allows manipulation of small to medium scale weather phenomenon to enhance friendly force capabilities and degrade those of the adversary. These ideas are hardly new, and neither is the technology to introduce flood or droughts. What is new, however, is the electromagnetic weaponry available to do these things on a global scale and to accurately plot global weather patterns using a complex array of network-centric weather stations and, in the future, space-based thermal lasers.
Oh, did not see the thermal lasers playing into this, but all right.
This is from the Air Force. We're still quoting. In 1945, the mathematician and later U.S. government advisor John von Neumann predicted, quote, forms of climactic warfare as yet unimagined. In 1948, Fortune magazine reported that the U.S. Army, Navy, and Air Force are spending close to $1 million a year on weather modification, and their tremendous interest suggests that military applications extend far beyond visiting a few showers upon an enemy. It does not require a sharp mind to figure out that wartime storms might readily be infected with virulent bacteriological and radiological substances. According to a U.S. Air Force report over a decade ago, that their boundary layer meteorological and aerosol research branch, which is terrifying, conducts a research program in the micrometeorological processes and structure of the atmospheric boundary layer. This program focuses on the interaction of the land-air interface with wind fields, turbulence, and the fluxes on optical methods of detection of aerosols, primarily chemical biological agents, and the modeling of their transport and dispersion in the tactical environment. So I'm going to send like a poison wind your way.
That's kind of what I was hearing there, is back to the evil fog. That's
This is all building up to evil fog. I feel like that's your perfect weapon. It's just this fog that like floating around. This makes me think like, have you ever seen like a UFO video where it looks like a cloud?
mm-hmm.
This makes me think of that. Like, I wonder if some of that isn't them piloting like nano fog.
Maybe where it looks like it has a shape almost.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There was one, I think, on one of our groups on Facebook this week that looked like a cloud, like crossing across, but it was like going too fast to be a cloud, but it was
Mm-hmm.
like had a shape, but it was definitely a cloud. It was weird.
Yeah, it was like doing something different than everything else.
Yeah. So this tends to suggest that the US Air Force is spraying the American public with biological and chemical agents in order to test the efficacy of satellite detection, something the activists call chemtrails.
Hmm.
In a 2005 parliamentary debate in the United Kingdom, the member of parliament David Drew asked then Secretary of State for Rural Affairs to, quote, look into the polluting effect of chemtrails for aircraft in the UK. And the US Congressman Dennis Kucinich's Space Preservation Act also mentions chemtrails by name, although the US Air Force dismisses the phenomenon as a hoax. Declassified records show, however, that the British Ministry of Defense did the same thing to the British public from 1940 through 1979.
Wow.
We're
Just
getting chemtrailed, man.
yeah, yeah, it sounds like we're getting chemtrailed.
Oh man. So the Fortune magazine quote from earlier from the late 1940s concerning biological substances strategically placed in storm cells has resonance with those line mouth floods in the 1950s in Britain. The Guardian reported that the Ministry of Defense also experimented with putting radiological substances into the clouds. What they would call a dirty bomb today. More recently, Dennis M. Bushnell gave a talk to NASA in which he outlined plans for dispersing airborne viruses such as Ebola and new specially engineered nanoviruses.
Hmm.
In
Wait,
19
this
yeah.
is in the 50s he's talking to NASA about this?
No, this Dennis M. Bushnell was more recent. It was like late last decade.
Okay. Okay. Still that it doesn't make me feel better. That I think I
No.
well no yeah, I still feel terrible.
Nano stuff bothers me.
Oh yeah, that's real well I mean viruses again, evil fog, like just
And as normal, in 1953, after Linemouth had been destroyed, the U.S. established the, quote, Presidential Committee on Weather Control, the director of which, Navy Captain H.T. Orville, said that if an unfriendly nation gets into possession to control the large-scale weather patterns before we can, the results could be more disastrous than nuclear warfare. That tells me right there we have it.
yeah.
If you're scared the other side has it, we do not stop working on it.
Yep.
And we know it worked at Linemouth. We know they used it during Vietnam. And in typical Cold War mentality, this Captain Orville claimed that the Soviets had already developed technologies designed to melt the polar ice caps. And it actually is true that the Russians experimented with ionospheric heating, and the latter may well be being used today in order to, quote, liberate shipping and open potentially vast oil and mineral deposits for exploitation, according to Professor James Fleming.
Oh.
And that is true. If you Google Russian in the Arctic, they, for the last decade or two, have been very aggressive. As things melt, they immediately go out to get the oil.
Okay.
Putin's been huge on that. And so
That makes
this
sense.
this keeps going back to like the whole climate change might be real, but also an excuse to like speed it up certain places, slow it down here, create a hurricane here. Like it's the perfect like cover, basically.
Yeah, it would be. Sounds like it is. Cool. Cool.
So, just as America has been deliberately provoking a race to weaponize space under the pretext of preventing a quote, space Pearl Harbor, evidence has emerged that the US has been weaponizing the weather under similar pretext. The lowest price for procrastination in this regard, immediate establishment of a rigorous atmosphere research program, will be political, economic, social, and military paralysis, a U.S. Navy report alleged in 1960, concluding that, quote, the highest price will be the absolute obedience to the leaders of the Kremlin.
It's just
a
weird to think of threatening another country with weather.
Yeah. And it's almost like we don't even know that Russia was doing it. We're just like, they might be doing this. We got to do it.
Yeah.
Kind of the same as their psychic research.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to tell who starts each thing or if it just starts out as just a weird paranoid delusion that then grows into something and then the other country starts doing it. But they definitely all end up doing it.
My guess is everyone's doing this.
Yes.
And Russia might be melting icebergs. I don't know.
That sounds like a very possible scenario.
Go out and get that oil, boy.
Yep.
Henry G. Houghton, a meteorologist at MIT, told the U.S. Department of Defense in 1960 that, quote, an unfavorable modification of our climate in the guise of a peaceful effort to improve Russia's climate could seriously weaken our economy and ability to resist. And this was echoed in congressional hearings, which claimed to, quote, know that the Russians are devoting great energy and scientific talent to learning how to control the weather, and it's urgent that the United States not fall behind in this race.
Man.
We have a weather war. Like, we basically are in a weather Cold War. It might not be a hot war yet, but we're definitely in a Cold War.
Well, it makes you wonder how much is actually just this has been happening over time.
I know, but it sounds so crazy.
Well, it does until you start getting into documents and stuff from actual like military people that are like, yeah, we thought it was a good idea. We need to be messing with this stuff because they're messing with it. And you fast forward like 50 years and they're still saying they're messing with it. There's something to it.
With the occasional stint of like, we're not longer doing it.
But that only seems to last for a few years at a time. And they're like, we're back at it, baby.
Stronger than ever.
Couldn't keep me away. I love playing with this weather.
Oh, man. So in 1962, the Pentagon's Advanced Research Project, which became DARPA, initiated a classified project entitled Some Upper Atmosphere Aspects of Chemical Geophysical Warfare. A year later, the CIA began a cloud seeding operation designed to rain off Buddhist protest in Saigon. It was later revealed to be a common practice by the US and Indochina, and by the end of the decade, continuing the excuse of needing to prevent a, quote, weather Pearl Harbor, DARPA launched Project Nile Blue with the stated aim of researching weather modification because, quote, it now appears highly probable that major world powers have the ability to create modifications of climate that might be seriously detrimental to America. I'm starting to wonder, like, if this started 50 years ago.
Like, was this Katrina? Like, I can just think of so many different things. I'm like, was this somebody attacking us, really?
Is this like everything? I mean, I don't know.
I mean, obviously weather events were happening before all this, but
I don't mean everything.
To have grown in magnitude and numbers in recent times.
How much of that change, right, is like carbon, and how much of that change is like this?
I'm leaning more towards this the farther you keep telling me things.
Jimmy Carter's national security advisor reiterated that the emerging techniques of weather modification could be employed to produce prolonged periods of drought or storm, about which the Vietnamese knew all too well. After the Pentagon Papers leaked, Seymour Hersh revealed in the New York Times that America had been manipulating the weather in Vietnam in order to cause floods. The project was deployed in several other countries, codenamed Operation Popeye. The U.S. Air Force also confirmed that positive results during this initial program led to continued operations through 1972, which resulted in a significant reduction in the enemy's ability to bring supplies into South Vietnam. But this also, as the Pentagon Papers revealed, was not limited to our enemies. A 1972 U.S. government rainmaking operation in South Dakota was followed by a disastrous flood and came under attack in a class action lawsuit. One cloud seeding airplane was even shot at.
What? There's just some guy out in his field with like an AR-15 or something. Like, stop spraying my fields.
Yeah, and this is like, so it's interesting. Like, as soon as Vietnam ended, like they're doing it here. I would love to look into that class action lawsuit. Like, I'm
Yeah.
sure that got put away real fast, regardless of like
What
money
happened?
got changed hands, or they said don't mess with the military. Other media has noted how the U.S. tried to flood Cuba's harvest with weather weapons. According to Professor James Fleming, Operation Popeye was not limited to Vietnam. It flooded Laos, India, Pakistan, the Philippines, Panama, Portugal, Okinawa, Japan.
Like, we hadn't
And
done enough there already?
we're just like testing this. Um, the 6 stated goals were to soften road surfaces, cause landslides, destroy river crossings, maintain saturated soil beyond the normal time span. Does this sound familiar? This is what we're witnessing across the world, mostly in third world nations today, the author notes. Mudslides are particularly affecting America's backyard, as Nixon called Central and South America, with devastation in Colombia, Brazil, Venezuela, and other emerging economic and political threats to the U.S. hegemony.
Cool. So we're kind of just keeping everybody else down with weather so they can't develop as fast so that we can continue to be number one.
We are number one. It makes you think. I mean, and I know, and again, it makes you, it's the perfect crime. Like,
It
it's
really
like,
is, because how do you get just back to the how do you prove this? You just sound crazy if you like accuse another country of like doing this, even though there's so much proof that it can be done and has been done
we have decades of documents that it has been done and
from
that they
multiple countries.
keep saying they're going to do it, but you can't prove that any one individual weather event.
Was that?
Right.
Yeah, it's pretty perfect. Don't ever have to fire a shot.
Nope. And in fact, to your point, in 1974, in a congressional hearing, the Pell Committee, U.S. Secretary of Defense James Schlesinger said, quote, "There is reason to argue that use of weather modification is a humane replacement for modern weaponry." And if you further believe this is a conspiracy, there have been numerous weather treaties. In 1975, the US and Canada signed a treaty at the United Nations which prohibited weather modification because of their geographic proximity, which seems like a crazy thing to do for something that doesn't exist.
Yeah. I mean,
this
also the fact that it needed to be done anyway, like we were worried that we were going to do that to each other.
Oh, that
Even though
totally
it could
adds.
definitely be like detrimental to us.
Oh, for real. Well, that totally adds to the whole South Dakota thing. Because if we're doing it all the way up there, they're probably like, "Whoa, bro,
What are you doing? Get a little close.
get this like devil rain away from me, devil fog."
Yeah, the evil fog. Ugh. Okay.
And in fact, this led to a general UN convention called the NMOD Convention of 1977, which prohibited military and other hostile use of environmental modification techniques. And it was a worldwide treaty.
Oh, so everybody probably stopped then. Again, they weren't doing this though, so I don't even know why they're signing a treaty.
Yeah, it's great. Why are you saying we're spraying stuff in the atmosphere? We just have like multiple international treaties and class action lawsuits, and we admit to using it in Vietnam. And there's a BBC documentary, which is basically the government showing that we flooded.
This all sounds very coincidental, Dennis.
I'm always so upset at myself when something that I've laughed at, like chemtrails, ends up basically being true. I'm like, that you know what? We grow, we learn.
Yep. But yeah, this is a real thing.
And this is what's really scary. So the NMOD convention, Article 1 was about prohibiting the military from using weather for hostile uses. Article 2 clarifies that the term environmental modification also refers to any technique for changing through the deliberate manipulation of natural processes the dynamics, composition, or structure of the earth itself,
What?
including the biota, the lithosphere, the hydrosphere, and the atmosphere, or even manipulating outer space. This is 1975.
Oh God, we're just it's amazing we haven't destroyed this planet yet. It really is.
Oh, if we haven't already, I mean, and it's just a matter of time. You know what I mean? Like,
Well, I know, but I mean, like in the very present, like right now, like it's amazing we haven't just completely just ruined everything.
look on the
Right
bright
now.
side. Look on the bright side. What if the reason politicians are so chill about climate change is they're like, look, bro, if you read this stuff, I know, it's all, it's all chemtrails, basically.
I've kind of that's been bouncing around my head as we've been talking about this. Like, is this why we're not? Well, you get people that are real dug in on, like, that are in power that are real dug in on climate change isn't real. Is it because we're doing most of it through chemtrails and like, oh, well, we could fix it on, like they're just under this
Yeah.
delusion, like we will just always be able to control it, manipulate it to be
Or
better.
they do know it's real, right? But they're like, well, we'll just get the technology to fix the weather.
Like, well, look,
Yeah.
we're already manipulating it now. Like, it won't be long before we can just grow a new atmosphere and stuff. Like, it'll be fine. We'll spray some Lysol cans up there or whatever, and we'll get it figured out. Aerosol, man. Aerosol fixes everything.
This is probably what happened to Mars a million years ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, according to Radio Free Europe, Russian scientist Andrei Arshev suggested. Do you remember in 2010 when they launched that black space shuttle, where NASA launched the unmanned space shuttle?
Yes, I think
So
so.
yeah. So for those of you who don't know, in 2010, it was really famous. NASA launched what's called the Pentagon and NASA launched the X-37B, which is an unmanned space shuttle. It's like a separate space shuttle, but it's unmanned, and it's been up there all this time. And
It's
so
still up there.
I believe it is. I have to look it
Oh,
up, but
wow.
it was up there for a while doing its thing. Just the idea that there's a space shuttle that's unmanned makes you wonder.
It's a space drone.
Yeah, it's a space drone. But I mean, a space shuttle, the whole thing about the space shuttle is it's a science lab. So there's got to be other stuff going on. It can't just be, you know what I mean? You just use a satellite if you just wanted something up there. Like,
Well, I think it does other stuff too. I mean, like, isn't it like a weapon?
the space shuttle? Well, this unmanned thing, we don't know.
I thought that's what we were talking about.
Yeah, well, nobody knows.
You just mean like a normal space shuttle?
No, it's the mysterious X-37B, the unmanned space shuttle. They've never acknowledged what it does. They just
Okay.
It's just they sent up an unmanned space shuttle. Radio Free Europe speculated that it, quote, carries a laser weapon that could be a key component to the Pentagon's climate arsenal. And the British Ministry of Defense predicted the use of space platforms to, quote, mitigate the effects of climate change or to harness climatological features and to support a military or strategic advantage.
I think that's what this is. They're convinced they can just play God about all these things now, and so like they're not worried about climate change because they're just convinced they'll be able to fix it when it comes time if it really needs
Yeah,
done.
yeah. They're like, well, or at the very least, they'll be like, okay, let's say there's less water to go around. We'll get the water. You'll get the droughts. We'll see how this goes, basically.
Yeah, yeah. Give the droughts to third world countries that can't do anything about it, and take their rain.
Yep. Oh,
Cool, 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 cool.
so our secret evil geniuses, the World Meteorological Organization and the UN Environment Program and the World Health Organization, have each confirmed that since the year 2000, hydrometeorological phenomenon, or quote, water related weather disasters, have reached record highs. And this is at a time when the UK Ministry of Defense confirmed that, quote, weather modification will continue to be explored. And of course, you know, the US is in on it too.
Well, yeah.
Chemtrail activists have documented thousands of hours of military aerial spray operations beginning in 1996 when the Air Force announced that by 2025 it would, quote, own the weather.
There it is. There's the quote.
Own the weather boys, the weather warriors. The purpose of that paper was part of a thesis to outline a strategy for the use of a future weather modification system to achieve military objectives. The Air Force acknowledged in 2000. In 2008, Live Science reported that, quote, an extensive and previously unknown twilight zone of particles in the atmosphere could complicate scientists' efforts to determine how much the Earth's climate will be warm in the future.
Well, yeah, because we got this weird all these variables we're putting up in the air.
I know, and they acknowledge it, but they're like, it's mysterious. We don't know where all these particles come from. The report from Live Science added that recent satellite observations have found a zone of in between particles in the air around clouds that was previously considered clear. And this came 12 years after activists began videotaping worldwide daily military spraying operations.
In between particles. Like,
They're saying like the air is just like thicker. Like,
there's like bubbles around clouds, is what I'm hearing.
I guess like prior to like the 2000s in general, if you're observing the air, you either have a cloud or it's kind of cloudy weather or you have like clear weather. Now it's like what we used to call clear weather just seems to have like this dispersed
a haze to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. And it does seem to, yes.
Yeah, sometimes that might just be the wildfires from California. Although it makes you wonder why they wouldn't just make it rain there. Unless Trump's just getting revenge on Hollywood.
Well, I wasn't going to take it there, but in my head, I was like, well, maybe they should have treated the president nicer. Maybe it would have rained there a little bit more.
I'll show you. The newly detected zone, says Live Science, is much more extensive, taking up as much as 60% of the atmosphere previously labeled as cloud-free. We have seen that in the US and the UK have had the ability to cause massive floods and droughts for decades and have used the technology to devastating effect, even on their own people. Indeed, a US Navy weather modification document acquired by Wire magazine stated that the purposes of weather warfare were to impede or deny the movement of personnel and material by rains, floods, snows, and blizzards, etc., and to disrupt the economy due to the effects of floods and droughts. And so I didn't realize this was going to get into chemtrails when I started reading this. And when I included that chemtrail stuff at the beginning, I was like, this sounds like chemtrails. What's going on? I Googled just weather manipulation. Okay, first of all the major news sites acknowledge it, but they only acknowledge that China has it. So, for instance, I just copied off like the first 6 results from Google. Popular Science Magazine, 2009. China's weather manipulation brings crippling snowstorm to Beijing. Wired Magazine. China leads the weather control race, 2007. The Guardian in 2009. China's weather modification works like magic. NewScientist.com, 2018. China is building a huge weather control machine. Will it work? And Forbes in 2018. China is launching weather control machines across the country. Uh, and when you look up, for instance, a website I like is futurism.com. It has a site, it has an infographic showing big events that we all acknowledge that China has been successful in with weather modification. They apparently have been openly, because they're open about this, because nobody has to vote there. Yeah. They are credited by the mainstream media and scientists with basically lowering their temperatures in the summer since 1997. They're credited with keeping all the rain out of Beijing during the 2008 Olympics. They're
wow. I mean, all right.
There's at least 2 blizzards that we're pretty sure we know they caused kind of an accident. And then
whoops, now you're covered in snow. Go and die.
And then of course there's all their, the open acknowledgement that they're leading this race. And so that's where I ended. I'm like, all right, I'm convinced chemtrails are real, and I'm convinced. And here's the lie. I promised the lie at the beginning of this episode. The lie is a lot of those videos are contrails, because a lot of the stuff you can't see when they drop out of planes. You know what I mean? It doesn't necessarily leave the trails. Okay. So it is possible that the trails sometimes might just be normal plane trail. And if you've ever watched the YouTube videos, you know what I mean? So once again, we're being gaslit. If you know where to read, where to look, you read from the actual military, you read stuff about other countries, you read what we say about other countries. We totally acknowledge chemtrails exist unless you say it's happening in the United States. And then you're a crazy person.
Yep.
And that is my case. I rest my case. I'm a chemtrail person.
You know what? I mean, I already pretty much was. I did not realize just how terrible this all really was. Like, man, I'm still thinking about the nanobots.
Yeah, I'm going to have to do a sequel where we get the like devil fog. This episode really just, the more and more I researched, I know some of it repeated, but it just was like beating me down with the idea that this is real. Like, here's another paper that says this. Here's another report that says this. Here's another. And it's just like,
That was definitely the most like just all the reports and everything put together. Like, that was really good and very scary for me. So I don't know how I feel about you right now.
Thanks, bro. May you have a foggy Wednesday.
Man, I am seriously scared of fog now.
Yeah, for real.
Especially, I don't even really know how you get away from it. Because, I mean, unless you have, like, a hermetically sealed house, like, technically it could still get you in your house.
Yeah, you can't. You can't get away from robot fog.
So cool. Like, you don't need to worry about a nuke because they'll probably just hit you with weather.
Yeah, why not? I mean, that's
better for the environment, kind of. Wow, that's debatable, I guess.
Also, it made me wonder, because I'm always like trying to take it as far as I can. It made me wonder if some of the China stuff, like the accidental blizzard, if that isn't like us doing that to them. And then they're like, we did that. I don't know.
That would be, I mean, that would be a weird China move as far as owning it so you don't look weak, basically.
I would like to, I know that at some point China started taking a foothold in Africa. I wonder if there's any allegations that they are causing, because all of the storms that hit like Louisiana, Puerto Rico, they all started in Africa.
Yeah. I
wonder if there's any allegations that China is doing operations there to like lob hurricanes our way.
I mean, like I was saying earlier, when we were talking about the lobbing hurricanes, I didn't even thought about China being there and that being an angle.
China's huge in Africa.
Well, I know that, but I hadn't thought about that's a good strategic jump off point if you want to sling hurricanes at the East Coast.
Yeah, it's definitely our weak point for where hurricanes come from.
Yeah, and again, it's hard to accuse somebody of making that happen because it happens all the time anyway. But they've been more significant. There's been more of them, and some of them have been really bad.
Oh gosh, I didn't even get into the parts of this that were about causing tsunamis, which Japan has been experimenting with since the 20s. Earthquakes, which sounded a lot like fracking actually when they described it. Um,
Well,
but
it kind of is. I've looked into that a little bit too. It basically kind of is.
yeah, we are where the monkeys are getting out of control, man.
Man, we are really playing a dangerous game. Like,
Yeah, we are. There's not a lot left.
no.
We're genetically modifying organisms. We're making diseases. Apparently, we're controlling weather.
We're putting diseases in the weather.
Yeah. I'm going to do a fog episode eventually.
I think you probably
Just
could.
for you. Yeah, I'm going to look into it. Like I said, I doubt that's the type of thing you could use in the desert, which is where we tend to have wars now. But
Well, you can make a dust
I'll check and
storm. You can
see.
make a fog that looks like a dust storm.
Yeah, that's true. Via
There's a lot of dust
nanobots.
storms in the desert.
Oh boy. Well, that's all I have, man. And
That's enough. That's
that's enough, sir.
that was good, man. That was
Thanks. Back to depressing. I wanted to go straight depressing this time. Like
yeah, I feel like you
like
did.
no like aliens coming to save you or like talk to you in mind. I just wanted to be like,
Well, I am gonna have to find like a spooky story for Halloween next week.
it's on you, buddy, man. It's gotta be spooky.
Yeah, we're gonna have to do some demon stuff or something.
Some witches. Have we ever done witches?
No, but I do have a couple ideas bouncing around actually. Oh. Thank you all so much for listening. We appreciate it. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, tell your friends at work, share it with somebody. We appreciate it. Maybe pick an episode that doesn't make you look too crazy. Just ease them in a little bit. But
Start with aliens impregnating people and just work.
I mean, that one was a good one. The alien hybrid theory. That one was, yeah. So thank you all so much for listening. We will be back next week. Bye.
Bye.
Love you.
Love you too.